All right, so welcome to, or whatever this is, another pointless podcast, or whatever you want to call it, something like that, for a video game that was released this year that apparently isn't doing well financially.
Still very disappointing, all things considered.
Which doesn't make sense, but then again, the company that made this game apparently are never happy with their sales. So if it's I looked online and it said that it's like the third best selling game this year, so that's still pretty good. I mean, I know it's not going to beat Helldivers, but I mean, yeah. So anyway, the game is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and my name is Justin, and I'm joined by Travis.
Yeah, my name's Travis.
And we're basically going to be talking about our opinions on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I beat the game. We're recording this in like early May, and I beat this game back at the end of March, but I've still been playing it. You recently beat it about a week ago?
Yep, about a week ago. I finally have beaten it, and I have not actually played since because I wanted to marinate on all my opinions, so this will be fun to talk about. Yeah, for sure. So if you're listening to this, if I put this on YouTube or wherever, just so you know, we are going to be talking about the game and all of our opinions on it, because there's a lot of stuff to take away from this like over 100-hour game. But we'll try and keep it as spoiler-free as possible at first, and then eventually we will move into spoilers for the story. But I mean, if you are trying to go into this game completely blindly as possible, if like for some reason you're like going through a remake or something and you want to try Rebirth and you stumble across this and you don't even want to know anything about the gameplay, we're going to be talking about the gameplay and stuff like that initially, so there will be spoilers for, I guess, the gameplay, but we won't go into any story beats really until later. So we're going to really touch on 5 things, and the first thing we'll talk about are our thoughts on the prior Final Fantasy VII stuff and our history of being a fan. Then we'll go talk about the game Rebirth itself, and then we'll talk about it critically. So first, and the 2 and 3 will kind of mix together, where we're going to be talking about the game as fans, and then we'll also kind of talk about it critically, because they kind of intersect, but we'll try and stay on topic as much as possible. And then when all's said and done, then we're going to move into the spoilers for the story and our interpretations. And then after all said and done there, then we'll go into our predictions for what's to come next, because there's only going to be one game left, and they've already announced that. But is there going to be anything in between? What are they planning on doing? Because, and again, we'll get to this later, but 2027 marks 30 years since the original game came out. So it does. Crazy to think about. Now I just feel old.
And the creators, all the big people involved are like past retirement age, and I'm pretty sure they all just kind of want to put it to rest,
be done with it.
We're done, close it on our terms.
Based off on the interviews I've read, it sounds like they want to move on either to other things, or they want to get this over with and move on to retirement. Or whatever. So, all right, well, we'll start with category 1, and I'll kind of start because my experience with this whole thing kind of goes to you, and then you can kind of go into your own experiences. But yeah, of course.
Final Fantasy VII, I was a Nintendo Sega guy growing up, and you've heard this story already, Travis. I had a lot of Sega and Nintendo consoles, but my friends had PlayStation consoles. So, like, I saw Final Fantasy VII. I played the original, like, Final Fantasy VII original game at friends' houses. Really didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, this is kind of neat. And then I had, like, a PC, pretty good PC in, like, the early 2000s. And after seeing and playing Final Fantasy X, I was like, oh, so this is, like, the, like, whatever, 3 games later after Final Fantasy VII. So this is like, I thought Tidus was Cloud.
Ooh.
And I know, like, they said that, and I thought like he was related to Cloud, or he was Cloud. And
maybe it's the whinier version of Cloud, maybe.
So I downloaded an emulator for PlayStation and played Final Fantasy VII again. And I did all of the, I guess, the Midgar part. I wasn't really good at it, but then I got stuck and I quit.
Which is fair, though. I mean, the Midgar part, it can be a little frustrating, and that's essentially the tech demo, if you will, of the game anyways.
Yeah. So I got stuck at the Zolom Snake, or in this game they call it Midgar Summer or whatever.
Midgar Summer. I don't know. Say it 3 times fast if you can pronounce it. Yeah.
I called it the Beta Snake because I died all the time with Beta, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together of using the chocobos to cross, and I know the game prompts you to do so, but like, again, I was using an emulator, keyboard, like arrow directions for this, and I'm just like, I don't care that much. And I'm just like, I was done, and then I played Super Mario RPG instead on an emulator, which is made by Square, which is it's really weird because Super Mario RPG is basically just a Final Fantasy VII game with Mario characters. I mean, the text boxes are the same, the sound effects are the same, but anyway, so let's jump ahead to 2020 during that very special year of 2020.
2020, nothing happened.
Nothing happened at all.
It's a boring year.
So like lockdowns were happening, and Animal Crossing came out for me at least, and that was fun and everything. But I knew about Final Fantasy VII, the remake. I knew about that project for a while, and I downloaded the demo, and the demo was really fun. Like, I'm like, oh, this is like... I kind of had those memories of like playing it on the emulator, but it wasn't strong or anything. But I'm like, oh, this is the gameplay wise. It's kind of like the Mass Effect series where you can like stop time and like pick your assignments for moves and stuff. Thought that was cool. I like the idea of like, it's not like a turn-based RPG where you're picking a command, you're actually button mashing or whatever. And it was cool, but then you started playing the game, and I said, I am curious about this game, so please keep me updated, because the demo was really
text
cool.
Conversation.
Yeah.
And I think at the time I started playing that... Well, I'll let you finish first. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was like, this looks like... It looks and felt really good. I'm like, play it and keep me updated, and I'm like, genuinely tell me if this would be worth my time or not. And you knew my history roughly about it, but I'm like, if you beat it and you're just like, it was fine, let me know it was fine. But then you beat it and you were like, you should seriously play this. Yeah. And so I bought the game and it was over. I mean, like, I guess I got wrapped up to... I mean, the production value alone is just like, it's like a Netflix show, or like, it's like a long-spanning epic of like... And I mean, the characters were very well written. I mean, it's credit to the localization, the way they use the English language. Like, it doesn't sound like translated. It sounds like someone actually tried to
put their efforts into the script versus just like, all right, let's just Google Translate it real quick and then throw it onto a screen.
So I was completely enamored with it, and right after I beat the game, I went right back and played Final Fantasy VII, the original game, again.
Which is the one I was begging you to play for so long.
And then played through that game again and did everything except beat Emerald Weapon. That's the only thing I couldn't do.
Oh, yeah.
The time limit and everything. I couldn't do it. And then after that, I was like, well, this is cool. So then I watched Advent Children. I read On the Way to a Smile, the book, which precedes Advent Children. Then I played Dirge of Cerberus.
No comment.
And then I played Crisis Core, but then Crisis Core Reunion came out a little bit later, so then I played Crisis Core Reunion, and then I played Remake again, and I played the original Final Fantasy VII again, and so it's been like almost 4 years, but I've just been like, I've been just
front and center,
delving in just because I just really wanted to get everything possible before jumping into Rebirth.
Yeah.
So now that that's done, your turn.
Oh, yeah. Well, first off, what was your very first... I think we've talked about this before, but what was your very first Final Fantasy game? Is it Final Fantasy X?
My very first Final Fantasy game was 7, technically.
7, technically?
Okay. At friends' houses. But the one that, like, I played the most was before 7, before I did the emulator thing. That was 10. That was 10.
Okay. Yeah, so my very first interaction with Final Fantasy as a whole actually was Final Fantasy X. going to a friend's house and playing that, and like fell in love with that story and the characters,
the
whatever.
The opening cinematic alone, it's like
the opening cinematic is for the time too. You're just right? Like, it's amazing.
It's next level. Like it was all over Toonami all the time and everything.
Yeah. So that was like my first true interaction with Final Fantasy. I heard about it going to my local at the time, which is now defunct, EB Games, right? Was that
Which is
that was the
GameStop.
thing, which is GameStop now. Yeah, going to EB Games and all that fun stuff. But anyhow, like played that only at a friend's house because I don't think I got PS2. Gosh, I don't even remember when I got the PS2, but it was quite some time, and I had like a low-key, more financially sound friend, I'll put it that way, and that he had a lot of the cool stuff,
and stuff like that. Yeah,
I like to benefit from going over to his house and playing stuff. That being a Final Fantasy X, but anyway, so once I got PS2, played that, loved that game, and so going to my local EB Games, like, what other Final Fantasies should I play? Because my friend who introduced me into Final Fantasy X tried to then introduce me to Final Fantasy IX, and everyone loves Final Fantasy IX.
Is that the one with like the mage hat? Like I just remember it was that 8, the one who was like this like mage hat. It's like
it's was it like Vivi, I want to say?
He looks like Marvin the Martian, but like with a mage hat. Yeah.
It's something like that. I want to say his name is like Vivi or something. And like Zidane, I want to say, is the main character. I don't know. I just remember playing at his house a little bit. Couldn't really get into that. The story just didn't really speak to me as like 10 had spoken to me. And again, granted, I was like, God, what was this? When did Final Fantasy X come out even?
2003, 04, something like that.
I was much younger.
It was somewhere around that time. Yeah.
But anyhow, yeah. And then so going to my local store, weirdly enough, the EB Games clerk actually recommended Final Fantasy VIII, not 7. Because he was like, Final Fantasy 7, everyone loves Final Fantasy 7, but 8 is actually the true, low-key, amazing Final Fantasy game. So weirdly enough, I went to playing Final Fantasy 8 before 7, actually. And I got about halfway through Final Fantasy 8, and I thought the game was just Couldn't really get into it.
I think I remember you telling this. Yeah.
Anyhow, I'll pause there for a second to backtrack a little bit. To your point, like you mentioned, I grew up being a Nintendo 64 kid, and literally like right now as we're recording this, I'm staring at my N64 from my childhood that shockingly somewhat works still.
You also have that amazing Spider-Man Funko Pop right there, which is like I eBayed that while we were getting set up. That's going for $150.
Is it really?
Yeah.
This is interesting knowledge I'm just learning about on the fly.
Anyway.
But like growing up, so I was more of a N64 Zelda kid, Majora's Mask, played those things on repeat constantly. Super Mario 64. What else? GoldenEye. I think that was like my religious games. And then was it Matchmakers or something makers? Mischief Makers. I weirdly enough used to play that all the time. No one knows what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of Mischief Makers.
God, it was.
I can't even my phone right now to look up Mischief Makers.
You should,
Continue.
Because I just remember playing it, not too much about it, to be honest, because I used to hate it. I would hate play it for some reason as a child.
Oh, this thing! I know what you're. I know what this is. I know what you're talking. I rented that once from Blockbuster. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, Blockbuster. R.I.P.
Yeah.
So played those a lot. A lot of my other friends were actually PlayStation people, but like I mentioned, I would go over to their house and play. And so I don't know what possessed me to eventually purchase a PlayStation 1. I think it was just really on sale at the time at EB Games because PS2 had been out for a while.
Yeah.
So I purchased that, and then that's when I, of course, as I mentioned earlier, played Final Fantasy VIII. Played that for a little bit. I was like, this is alright, but I'm going to get Final Fantasy VII because, that seems to be universally beloved. And I got it, and then of course back in the day you would also buy the game guide as well. And I still have the game guide too. It's right actually in my entertainment system down there as well.
The Prima one, like the Prime games or whatever. The Prima one.
I'll have to check in a second.
The white cover.
Yes, it is the white cover.
That's the one.
Okay.
I have.
Yep. So I got that. I purchased both same day. And I remember playing the Midgar section and being like kind of into it, like, oh, this is all right. I mean, this is interesting. It's funny because even back then, like early 2000s, right? It's like, oh, these graphics, they're like, they're okay. But after I got out of Midgar and started playing more and more of the game, I just kind of fell in love with the story and the characters. I also thought I was super cool kid, being young and having characters clearly swear hello Barrett and the various symbols. But just like fell in love with the game, and I remember speeding through it in like a week or two during the summer, and then playing it again because I loved it so much. And yeah, I think the rest is kind of history in terms of loving that. Just fell in love with Final Fantasy VII, and I would just recurring play it randomly every now and then. I would play it on PS2, so when I got a PS2, played it on that as well. You know, and I had a great time there. And then, just I've been a Final Fantasy person ever since, but kept on coming back to Final Fantasy VII. So speed forward to not 2020, but I would say the 2016
or something, 15, 16. That was like when it was announced officially.
Well, that, but I was going to say also when we first kind of like met at the TV station, like 2015-ish, maybe 2014. And I remember randomly throughout the years just kind of coming to your office and being like, Justin, preaching the gospel of Final Fantasy VII.
Well, we would talk about like a lot of things, but you would say yeah, you should play that game, and I just said I played that on an emulator, like whatever. Like it was.
I just like to remind I just felt like I was so not persistent, but I like to just low key bring it up. Be like, hey, I need someone else to talk to about how awesome this game is.
Yeah, because like I would send you cutscenes from 10 all the time, and I would be like, this scene was awesome and whatever.
And then the comparisons, like to the block characters, of course, the infamous block FF7 characters. But anyways, fast forward also to your point earlier, COVID in 2020, and weirdly enough, I purchased the FF. X and X2 remastered.
Yeah, I got that too.
Editions right before COVID had happened, and I remember speeding through all of X and then like halfway through X2 before I remind myself how I'm 50-50 on that game as well. I think you like that game more than I do.
I like the game. I liked that it did actually conclude everything. Like, there was a definitive ending.
Unless you have the super secret ending, in which case it's like...
Oh, yeah, the super one where, like, they have that weird stinger at the end where you're like, that was kind of weird.
Tidus is back, maybe. Pooping out that bubble again or something. Who knows?
Yeah, that was like... But for the most part, it actually did conclude everything. So I was like, that's... In contrast, the original ending of Final Fantasy VII is very, like, ominous. It kind of just ends so abruptly, but anyway.
It ends well, we'll get into it, but... Yeah, anyways, like played that, and then of course, as you mentioned, Remake had come out, and I was super stoked to play that, and I had a blast playing it. The ending again kind of blew my mind. Of course, I think it did a lot of players at the time, and I'm glad that you have hitched your ride on the wagon that is Final Fantasy VII as a whole.
Yeah, when Remake's ending happened, I didn't get it at first, because again, I knew who Sephiroth was, I knew about that relationship, but when the scene with Zack came in, I was like, huh?
Whereas, like, I'm losing my mind, like, what? How is this possible? He's alive? And I will say, I kind of glossed over a little bit, but yeah, I also, of course, Advent Children. Watched that. I remember just waiting for the day, counting down, going to my local Best Buy and buying that. Of course, when Dirge of Cerberus came out as well, I was super, super stoked. If only could go back in time and forewarn. I don't
think Dirge is a bad game. It's just it's not the same, and the story is very.
I mean, it's not terrible, but I think with how much hype that the FF7 compilation like really
it's the worst
was getting
thing
at the time.
It's the worst thing in it, but there's stuff in there that's really good.
Yeah.
It's and the gameplay is like half-baked. It's not like...
Yeah, and I mean, I will say that playing the original FF7, I'm not gonna lie, Vincent was one of, if not my favorite character, at least on original playthrough.
Oh, not mine at all.
I mean, over the years, I would say it's kind of more changed to like that Cloud dynamic.
I hated his I said Final Smash. I hated his limit
breaks where he's just changing the different...
I'm just like, this is ruining everything. I'm just like...
Yeah, I mean, his limit breaks were kind of, I don't know, interesting.
Beast mode.
But I don't know, I just like this cool, mysterious
vampire
character.
That dresses as a vampire for some reason.
Right.
Because he's mad over some girl.
Yeah, and of course, as you learn a lot later.
Yeah,
but, so, and that was another reason why I was so stoked for Dirge, but yeah, Dirge was just disappointing. But this isn't a Dirge chat. This is a Rebirth chat.
Yeah. So we'll also disclose too that we also did play the intermission DLC. Mm-hmm. We both played that.
Yep. Yes, we did. You played it before me.
Way before. I played
way
twice.
Before. Yeah. I've played it. I guess I have played it twice now too. Yeah, I have. But I was one of the people that struggled to get a PS5 actually.
Yeah.
And that was a struggle. And I just super lucked out. Randomly, Amazon had them in stock, and also was discounted $100. So someone was looking out for me.
Ching, ching.
I know. I was really stoked.
So, because there's some people who are gonna play Rebirth who didn't play the intermission, which is it's not a critical piece to play that beforehand, but it's
so much more rewarding, though.
More rewarding, a lot more rewarding, especially because we can get into now, but the character of Yuffie will not mean anything unless you really did play the intermission DLC.
Yeah. But I will say, even if you didn't play the DLC, the character of Yuffie, and we'll probably get more into it.
We'll get more into it.
But it's more rewarding to play the intermission.
It is.
But already it's rewarding because she's now a non-optional character. Like, she's going to be part of your party. She's going to be part of the party. Yeah, because she was optional in the original game. I'd be curious to know if anyone actually skipped getting Yuffie, because Yuffie and Vincent are optional characters, and I'd be curious to know how many people actually just skipped ever getting those characters.
Yeah, I want to. I honestly, it's like I'll never
a blind survey.
Yeah, I will never actually do it because of time, but I kind of want to do a run of that game as fast as possible, skipping that. Just how fast can I beat the game?
Ooh, it's got to be at least 25 hours, I would say.
Yeah, because the average time of playing the original game is 40 hours. Average time, if you try to do absolutely everything, it's longer. But
well, you have the button mash too, with the speed runs, all the dialogue, boxes and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on to our review as fans of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, I guess, as a fan, what did you think of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
As a fan of Final Fantasy VII as a whole, I would say Rebirth was a amazing game. The story was fantastic. But I'm a little hesitant because part of me, there's a good 20% of me that's I almost wished it was more.
Okay.
And when I say more, I don't mean more game, because good lord, it's sinking 80 hours at least into it.
130 for me.
Yeah, I don't even know my hour count. I have to double check now. But what I mean by more is actually more changes. I feel as though at the end of Remake, and we'll get more into it, get more spoiler territory, but I'm assumptions that everyone has at least played Remake, and if you haven't, maybe pause right here and play Remake. But
we're assuming that you have at least played Remake. So
right.
Remake spoilers are fair game.
Yeah. And with that whole indication of, the Zack reveal was such a huge deal, right? Yeah. And the talk of how they're now able to change their fates potentially.
Yeah.
I feel as though Rebirth kind of hits pretty much similar story beats. Yes, there's like larger story beats and there's more depth to all the characters, which is amazing. But I'm almost wish that there was more either wrinkles, changes, if you will, because of the whole ending of Remake.
Okay.
But overall, kind of that's a minor quibble, I would say, because honestly, the game is fantastic.
Yeah.
The quality of game is, the graphics are amazing. The music is amazing. The depth of character is just so rewarding. Characters, like I mentioned earlier with Yuffie, being an optional character in the OG.
Yeah.
Now I care so much about her story and just so much about that character. And it just really kind of blew me away to have the Sonon of it all too, and just the emotion that she has, and having her be less of a cartoon character.
Oh yeah, way less. But they do acknowledge the cartoon aspects from the original game with her, but yeah.
Oh yeah, the little like constantly doing the little
motion sickness thing.
The motion sickness thing, which admittedly by the end I was like, okay, we get it. She has motion sickness there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would say, because I don't want to get too much in the spoiler territory quite yet, but it was an amazing game, and I think that everyone should play it if you are a Final Fantasy fan.
Yeah. So for me, as a fan, and almost critically too, but I'll explain. I kind of think it's a masterpiece, but it's a weird masterpiece. So as a fan, in terms of what did they do from Remake to Rebirth, they improved the gameplay for everything. Like Cloud now, I'm scared to go back to Remake now, because Cloud in Rebirth is like this well-oiled machine now. Like, you do a dodge roll and he gets this blade beam move. Like, you dodge roll, you can...
The blade beam move, I will say, was like night and day. Yeah. I was so stoked. I'm like, oh, finally I can hit, range monsters now.
Like, the ranged battle, it's a massive improvement.
Yes.
Yeah. Tifa now has, like, her Unbridled Strength now has, like, that other tier where, like, one's, like, more elemental focus, one's more, like, staggering focus.
Like the Omni Strike, too. Everything. Oh my gosh,
so good. Yeah. Barrett kind of operates the same, but they give him a lot more like things to do to be more versatile. Aerith is broken if you know how to use her properly.
Once you told me about the true proper ward shift technique, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. And then Yuffie, who returns, pretty much operates the same as she did in Intermission. There wasn't any notable changes except a few new moves. Red 13 joins the fray, and he's more of like a sort of... he has big attacks, but then he also can attack very quickly in succession. So he has like big moves, but then he also has... He does like...
Well, he's playable now, too, which is also a big deal.
But like he... his attacks are like, he has like these big attacks, but then like his normal damage attacks are just like minimal. And then Ketchi, Kate Sith, it's pronounced Ketchi technically.
I don't know. That is the one thing I forgot to mention. I just forever am not a huge fan. Sorry to all the lovers of Kate Sith, or however you pronounce his name.
Wasn't good in the original game. He's an improvement over the original game is, but
he is
not
more
like
tolerable.
It's hard. He's more tolerable, but it's still the least fun character to play as. I appreciate the effort, but not he, like in the original game, uses a lot of luck-based things for combat. However, the big problem with its character is that it's a glass cannon kind of thing, and Aerith very much is too. But Aerith, if you know what to do, she can be insanely broken despite being a glass cannon. I mean, but Kate Sith doesn't matter. Glass cannon, and you have to leave things up to chance. Now, if you get lucky and you use a lot of like luck up materia, then maybe you're in for a good show. But every time, and there's this one puzzle involving Kate Sith too.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Every character gets their own little unique parts where they get to utilize their own special abilities, and Kate Sith has a section that leaves a lot to be desired.
That's a kind way to put it. When we get into more spoilery territory,
so
I have an angry rant about that.
But the game opens itself up. It is as they call it. It's like they claim it's like open world, but I call it like. And it is, but it's very clever what they do, where they introduce you to like this big open area at first, but then they take you to like a very narrow closed area, like what you would see in Remake, to get you into another open area. And then they put you in another closed area again to then get you into yet another open area. This is kind of the pattern what they do throughout the game. And if you were a fan of how Remake kind of kept things very narrow and such, then you will get some of that in Rebirth. But Rebirth also completely reinvents the wheel in terms of it takes a lot of notes from open world games where there's a big map, there's always something to do. But the thing with Rebirth that's just so cool is the fact that everything you do is worth it. Like I wanted to do everything on the map that it tells you to do because there are genuine rewards for it all. It's nothing is meaningless. There's always a point to doing everything on the map. Like you were saying, like during your playthrough, you're like, I want to move on, but it's worth doing all of this stuff. Like you feel inclined to do it.
Yeah, and that does. Yeah, that's a really good point. Story pacing wise, that does kind of remind me. That is actually an issue that I think I even remember texting you how I felt as though like everything was worth it, right? Like the world intel stuff is all pretty great. Like the story beats and just the rewards that you get. I feel like doing most, if not all, is almost a necessity depending on what mode that you're playing on. Especially if it's like normal or hard mode. I feel as though you have to do it to beef up your characters.
Oh yeah, you have to.
But on the flip side, I now almost want to play it again and do kind of like not a speed run maybe, but a more efficient run and focus mostly on the main story beats because of how you can do like 10, 15 hours before you even circle back to the main story. And you're like, wait, what the heck is going on?
Like without going into story spoilers yet, because we'll get there. There is a an element, an unanswered question, if you will, that was one of the top 5 questions I had from Remake going into Rebirth. And without going into too much detail, they kind of answer the question right at the start of the game. Like, and this aspect doesn't circle back for like if you're doing everything 30 hours later. Suddenly, like 30 hours later, you come back to this part, and you're like, oh, that's right.
Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. And the cool thing though is that when you do beat the game, you will unlock hard mode. And the thing with hard mode is that you carry all your stuff over from the game, and if you did side quests, they already count. So going through the game again on hard mode
I didn't know that.
With all your stuff, you can just go through the main story. You don't have to do side quests. You don't have to do anything on the map.
So your completion percentage for like the side quests is already...
It's already done. You just have to do the main story beats on hard mode. That's it.
Okay, that's interesting. And then is hard mode 2 the one where... I may have misread it online. You can't use items.
You can't. You no items. No items and no benches. You can use cushions. So like the trick is like what I'm gonna do is load up on 99 cushions and then like.
Well, yeah. At the very end of the game, I think I had like 115k of gil. Yeah. I'm like, what? I just started randomly buying like 99 of Maiden's Kiss.
Yeah.
Sure.
Why not?
Echo Salt. Sure.
So you can because Oh, no, I'm wrong. You know what? You can use benches, but benches won't restore MP. But the cushions will.
Oh, okay.
So resting at an inn will restore MP. Cushions will restore MP, but normal, if you're just walking through and you hit a bench, you can't do it. But again, what's cool is that you can like in the original game, this is a slight gameplay spoiler, but it should be expected. You do get the chapter selection at the end, like in Remake, where you can jump to any chapter again, retain your level, and if you're trying to do the hard mode playthrough, which I do plan to do, it seems doable. I've not tried it yet, but it seems doable.
Yeah, so, I've heard a lot of, I shouldn't say heard, but I've read a lot of mixed feelings about hard mode just because of how hard it can be.
It can be, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if I want to do hard mode or not, because part of me is like, well, I enjoy playing games for like the story, and I like 100%ing when I can. Except for things like Spider-Man, where it's like chase all the pigeons, in which case my eye twitches too much. But spoilers for Spider-Man on PS4,
Spider-Man 2.
Well,
it is in the first one.
Yeah, the first one. Yeah, the first one you're chasing pigeons more. The second one, actually, I did do the pigeons. But anyways, but like hard mode, I wonder if that would taint some of the enjoyment factor for me personally as a gamer.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I might try it. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems doable. And I think that's pretty much it. What I will say too is like the game offers a lot of different mini games in it, and the original game did too, and I understand like that's why they did that. There's a lot of different there's a lot of mini games, and there's been a lot of voicing about that. There's a lot of mini games, there's a lot of ways of transportation and to get around,
which is like the original game though.
Yeah, both are in the original game, and very much, and it's why I kind of say it's like kind of a masterpiece to me, because like they're kind of letting you play the game how you kind of want to play it. Yeah, they're the main story beats, but you will get as much out of the game as you kind of feel like getting out of it, especially with like how you can change up your party and everything. The only real thing is like, and I know it's mandatory, I wish like, I know Cloud has to be the party leader, but it would have been cool if like
you could change your party leader
it and it didn't matter. And maybe that's something they'll try later, but yeah, there's a lot of different, and I guess we'll go also into now like the critically part of how we feel, which we've kind of addressed it, but the thing is like there's a lot of variety here, and
do you want to give it like on a scale of 1 to 10 type of deal?
I mean, for me, like as a fan, it's like a 10 out of 10, because again, I feel these mini games, these little things, even like the story beats, like there's things about the story that I'm questioning, but I'm like, I mean, when you're done the game, you feel like this like separation anxiety thing where you're like, oh man, like it's over now, like I can't discover this, and like that says something. And even the bad mini games, they're fully realized, like you can tell like they were trying to do something, and there's that term of throwing something on the wall till it sticks or whatever that is, throwing anything, and it's a little bit here, but like they were all fully realized. I think there's the biggest one is Gears and Gambits, which is just, it's a mini game, it's one of many, and it's really bad. But then you look at something like Queen's Blood, which is this card game that it's amazing. It's
I could play that as an app on my phone.
And people are asking for online play for that, and I'm like, that would be awesome.
I could see that. I would give, if well, in terms of like a numbers, I would say a 9.5 out of 10. Or 9 or 9.5, whatever, splitting hairs. But for me, it's like it's definitely like a masterpiece level for me. But there's like some minor quibbles as someone who also grew up with the game and everything else, that like, I think when they announced the remake project, I expected more changes than there have been thus far.
Yeah.
And part of my issue is I feel as though even like Remake 2 to a certain extent, all of the changes, big reveals, and the oh my god story moments are just like in the back 2 hours.
Yeah, they're saved till the end. There's some things they do sometimes, like, and that's why I'm glad I did everything, because I mean, right away from the beginning, and we'll get into this in stores, there's a, which is also the tutorial for the game, but there even something at the beginning, there's an incident in the beginning where there's a flashback and there's a house on fire, and there's something that's seen on screen where if you know your stuff, you're like, paying attention.
Yeah.
So again, critically, if I were to critically analyze this, it's probably honestly like an 8 out of 10 for me. For as a fan, it's like a 10. So maybe a 9 is an average of the two or something.
Yeah, I mean, even as like a critic, I think most critics on different outlets have given it either like a 9 out of 10 and around that too.
Because like the movement's really great, but then like, and I'm sure you got around this too, like the game doesn't, there's a lot of moving around, there's a lot of heights you can travel, and it never really tells you like what's scalable, what's not, and then there will be times where you're trying to go up something and it doesn't work, and then suddenly it does. And then you jump down something and Cloud, like, pencil dives onto the ground, basically.
Yeah, the climbing thing was interesting because there were definitely certain moments in time where I feel like those developers didn't mean for you to be able to jump to certain things.
It does feel like that, but then it does, because, like, you can do it, but it doesn't feel like that.
Right, and then there's other times where I'm like, you clearly should, based off what I've seen thus far throughout the game, you should be able to climb or jump to this or whatever, and you can't. And it's a minor quibble, but yeah, like, that was something that I did notice. The minigame aspect, I was overjoyed for most of them, and to your point, there were a few that just kind of grinded my gears, no pun intended. Yeah, I know. But I mean, there was that one. There was just certain times where it's like you're playing this, like, you're into the story or into the side mission, then all of a sudden it's like, guess what, time for another mini game. You're like, no, I was getting into the story. And it's like, it's silly ones where, and I can spoil, like, some of the mini games, right?
Yeah, you could talk about the games. Yeah, not, like, don't go into, like, obviously, like, the full detail of what they. Well, it's gameplay spoiler, so technically it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not really a spoiler.
Yeah, it's not really.
There's
a spoiler.
Like one mini game where you're riding a dolphin, and it's not even really.
It's like Wave Race 64.
It is actually just like that. Is a great comparison. It is kind of like that.
Even the music. Which the music's amazing.
The music is amazing, which we haven't really touched on. But the game the minigame rather, is just like, why is this here? This seems like it is not, and it's not really much of a minigame because you don't really get much. If America, you don't either get your rewards. Maybe the first time you do get a reward, but regardless, it was like, why is this a minigame? There's like some things where it's like, why?
It's only like the second time where they give you, you'll get these, like, special items towards the end of the game that you can get by defeating area bosses, and these items are, like, crazy good, where like one of them, like, you can make your limit break, like, you get different limit break levels in this game, and you did in Remake as well, but they didn't really, like, stress it. But in this game, like, every character has different levels. Like Barrett, for example, will have, like, the satellite cannon as his max limit break, but then he'll just have that normal fire in the hole move as his generic move, and then Tifa will get, like, the dolphin move as her, like, ultimate one, versus, like, she just has, like, that somersault kick. Aerith has, like, the planet protector, and then Cloud, of course, gets, like, that
is it Extension?
That's his that's tier 2. He has a third one that's called, like,
oh yeah, if you unlock, you're talking about the unlockable ones, the very But then like this item, like, which you need to do the dolphin game to get the items to craft it. It gives you that, like, high max thing. So for me, I'll have that on Cloud, and you get an ability too to limit Siphon, where you can steal limit break meter from your teammates. So basically, they have some new materia in new materia, game, which is really cool.
New materia. Some the same as Remake and the original game, and some that are just entirely new. I will also say too, as just my favorite element from the original game was the enemy skill materia, and that does make a return in this game, but you only get one, and you only...
Which frustrated me, yeah.
Yep, and you can only get the abilities by doing the Chadley VR challenges, which also return.
Are frustrating, in my opinion.
They're frustrating.
Well, can be frustrating.
But they seem... in this game, they are... I revisited this much more frequently than in Remake, because there are incentives to do these, because you do get genuine... You get the elemental materia. Is the only way you can get that is through Chadley, basically. So they're... Again, what I'm trying to stress is, like, the game, there's just so much to do, and on that reason alone, it's a masterpiece. Not everything works, and that's okay, because there are some people who probably love the Dolphin game or Gears and Gambits.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just our opinions of whatever. I mean, I feel like I'm probably more... old man grumpy critical at times, but no, I think, like, the mini games, at least which I'll give them credit, they mostly serve a purpose of some kind, whether it's a story purpose or to get an unlockable that could be really helpful to you. It's not just a mini game for the sake of mini game necessarily.
Yeah.
And I found that to be rewarding. So even though I didn't love all the mini games and the fact that there's so many, and that is one thing where I just want to call out that it can feel at times, at least to me, overstuffed with just, you go to, especially when you get to the Gungaga and Corel sections, you go, oh my goodness, look at how many different things I have to do.
Yeah, there's
it gets very I felt at least overwhelmed at times, and especially in Gungaga where the navigation factor to me, I think I even texted you at one point because I just could not for the life of me figure out how, which mushroom thing, whatever.
Which is it's weird, and Gungaga, it's my favorite area, which
the music is banging though.
The music's amazing. Visually, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's if you remember the original game, Gungaga is like 3 screens, and in this game, it's a complete overhaul. And
which a lot of the lands, though, I think in general, from compared to the OG, there's a lot of different lands that are very much more, not obviously expanded. Mount Coral, is huge, but all the lands obviously got a major facelift, of course, and they got expansions.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, Gungaga especially is definitely something that comes to mind where you're like, what?
They took nothing and turned it into something. But yet Gungaga does have those platforming issues where you don't know what you can climb or what not. And
I think that's where I did feel it the most. And to a certain extension to Corel as well also
Parts
had some moments where I'm like...
Cosmo Canyon too? Cosmo Canyon a little bit?
You know what? Yeah, I would say the back half of the game, really. It's just more and more frustrating, and I feel as though the developers, how can we make this giant land now feel fresh and new?
Yeah.
Which is fine, don't get me wrong, but... Cosmo Canyon, figuring out, okay, which platform do I have to go and glide off of to get this other part?
One, and then can I cheat it by any means by using updrafts that, which chocobos return in this game too. I'll say, in the original game and remake, they were a ride, but in this game you can pilot them. Again, there's a lot of ways of transportation, and I won't go into all of the methods, but. They really do a cool spin on the chocobos in this game. They very much try to make it a unique kind of thing.
More relevant.
Yeah.
And it just gets me really excited for part 3.
Yeah.
Non-spoilers at all. Really just the mode of transportation.
Yeah, the mode of transportation. Especially with... if you are... Again, we're going to jump into spoilers in a little bit for story-wise, but...
More specific spoilers.
I had an idea of where the game was going to end. I had 2 ideas of where the game was going to end. I'm like, it's either going to end here or it's going to end here, big picture speaking. And I was right with one of them, but I wished it ended at the other spot. And without saying much more yet, I wish it was later than where it ended, just a little bit later.
I understand. Should we just go
right in? I guess we'll just use this to talk about the spoilers. We're not gonna capture this whole game beat for beat. You have a lot of stuff written down, which is great.
And I mean, a lot of it focuses on the ending because, like I said, I think really the major beats, the oh my gosh moments, kind of are. Not self-contained, but they're mostly saved to that ending, kind of 2-3 hours. But yeah, let's get into it. There's a lot to unpack, and we're not going to be able to do everything in.
No, we're not, and we might
80 to 120 hour game.
yeah. And if we miss stuff and there's too much, maybe we'll do a second series of this or something if we miss lot of stuff or something. But
I'm sure we will. Yeah.
And also, I'll just if we're ourselves listening to this later, or if this is online and you're listening to this and the audio sounds a little wonky, apologies. This is testing out new stuff, so.
Thanks. And makeshift area to record
makeshift
as
area
well.
To record. So
you'll be agile.
So anyway, So. Right away, what I was mentioning earlier, the Zack thing, where the game starts with Zack, and I'm like, Okay. Here we go. Jeez, like
I loved that it started out throwing you into a direct change. So initially, and that's again circling back to my point, where like, I wish there's more changes.
Yeah.
Because the way it ends you from Remake and the way you start in Rebirth, there's all these huge revelations and huge changes, right? And then it goes from that to, and I remember texting you this too with the Zack of it all. You know, you start with Zack, and then what? It's not another 20 hours, would you say? At least 15, 20?
And then you're Zack again. You're like,
right.
Oh, that's right.
I totally forgot Zack's like around somewhere.
And so what I was trying to say earlier is like during the Nibelheim incident when the house is burning and you're like walking, you see like a security guard climbing towards the door and saying "Mom," and it's like says security officer "Mom," and I'm just like, oh, that's good.
There's some great cuts, and the fact that it's a very strong start to the game. I think they picked a brilliant time to kind of chop that up and really have like the Zack of it all, of course, but then also have the Nibelheim incident as well.
They started where we kind of thought they would start, especially because intermission they used a post cutscene to kind of shuttle them from Midgar to Calm. It was smart. They're like
that's fine.
Yeah.
Because if you remember in the OG game, again, it's a product of its time, right?
Yeah.
So when they're leaving Midgar, they're just kind of
blink.
Well, they're not only that, but like I remember specifically your block characters are just climbing down this random rope or cable or whatever, and just let me just pop out of Midgar and we're cool. Like that doesn't.
You just blink into the overworld, and then you kind of gotta shuffle around and fight encounters, and then
you're just kind of there, and it makes sense for like a AAA game to have that transition, have it be like more of a cutscene movie-esque type of feel. Which again, I just go back to the graphics are just they're so good.
They're so good, and it's smart. It was smart, interesting choice, but smart that they're using Unreal Engine 4, and Unreal Engine 5 is available now. But they're sticking with 4 because that's what they used for Remake, and I imagine they're going to keep it with the third because it gives it that uniform look. Because when they're going to do it when 3 releases, they're going to do a trilogy box set. You know they will.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And they'll even do something like the original game, and then like Dirge, and which.
And waiting for that, like I don't know, remaster of some kind.
I'm thinking that's like a part. We'll get into that in category 5, but I think they might try that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. But anyway, So the story, it's if you follow the original game, a lot of stuff you're gonna kind of be like, this is okay. Like Junyan, for example, is like, well, this is pretty it's not, but it is. Like, it's like, well, that whole town is a lot more homey, if you will.
It is, and like having it the way like it's under Junyan, and you have like above and below, whatever. I think they did a pretty good job. Having the two mesh together, and I do chuckle though, where it's like, this is the Junyan region. It's just basically all random, not even forest, I don't know what you would even call it, like plains, water, ship wreckages,
things that your chocobo can scale, which that was just annoying.
That was something, right? Like, your chocobo is like super strong, but only in this region, and can like climb walls
very slowly, where you're like, troon.
Right. It's like got cement on its feet. I did want to call out first, because this is something I wrote down, and maybe you can tell me if I'm off base this. So I want to circle back to Zack real quick.
Yeah, by all means.
Because I myself am still confused, but talking it out, we have how many different Zacks would you say in the game? 3?
That's
different.
That's a hard call. I want to say at this point 1, and this has to do with the ending ultimately, where. And again, this is going to be all over the place now because this is open spoilers, and we're assuming that
100%.
We're assuming that you either don't care or you know what's happening. And again, apologies if we are scattered, but these are just immediate thoughts. So ultimately, in the end of the game, Sephiroth shows Cloud like that there are multiple. I don't even want to say they're called like realities. To me, like they're more like timelines, but they're presented as realities. But basically. It's indicated by like a white rainbow kind of wash where like you see like certain things happening. And Zack makes multiple decisions where you see certain things happening on that end.
And they all branch out. Yeah.
But then by the end of it all, and a lot of this I think has to do with Aerith and kind of Tifa, Zack is sitting alone in that church, and I'm kind of convinced, like, where is that church? I'm kind of convinced that's in
the so this is how I will, well, as we talk about this, so the way I try to name thing, well, first off, it's the Stampaverse, the multiverse, the stamp. I even have my notes like Stampverse, because I mean, that's how you kind of tether yourself into which of, like, reality, timeline, world, however you want to coin it, is the stamp of it all, right? So we
literally it's a stamp.
I mean, we have our main stamp, which is the, like, what did I write down? The beagle with the helmet is like the main one, for lack of better terms. And then you have, as like we see Zack again, there are occasions where you see different types of stamps, and that to me indicates different timelines, realities, whatever. And so the way I counted it is there's at least 3 stamp verse whatever that you see of Zack throughout the entirety of the game. And by the end of the game, you eventually get to a Zack, the same Zack Prime, if you will, that you kind of start at the beginning of the game with, and it's almost like nice bookends, right? You have this certain Zack character at the beginning, and you have that, what I assume is the same Zack at the end. And the reason for that is he isn't Zack is set with many different decisions throughout the game. And every time he makes a decision that's like a new branch, reality, timeline, whatever. You have the one where he goes to save Biggs at Reactor 6. You have one where he decides to help out Cloud by going to see Hojo at the Shinra HQ.
Which you don't see actually happen,
you don't. Well, the only thing you see from that is him,
the guards and everything.
Is the guards, I think, right before HQ, right? Like the outside. And then you also have Zack, who's just like, well, I don't know, and sits at the church on the outside going, what do I do? So that's how I counted it, right? So you have,
as
like,
Johnny walks by.
Right, as Johnny walks by with also a dog. I counted that one as its own thing almost, too, because Johnny walks by, but he has like a dog in his arm that looks kind of like a corgi. Shout out to all the corgis out there. But you have that universe as well. But that one's interesting because Sephiroth basically doesn't. Some people have read online, they say, oh, like he gets killed, but he doesn't. He gets like slashed, or he kind of half dodges it, and he gets thrown into what I like to call, shout out Kingdom Hearts, the world between worlds, in that, like, it's the white void.
Sephiroth makes some line where he says something like, as I can join, I can also separate, or something, where then he, like, makes that slash.
Going back to the end of the game, right, when and this is one of the coolest parts, such huge payoff if you're like an OG, grew up whatever with the game, having Zack and Cloud fight side by side against Sephiroth. Oh man, it was so cool.
It was so cool, so short. And again, I wrote to you. I think, like, it's just a precursor to what they eventually do plan on doing. Like, it was my favorite boss fight from the game. I'll say that much. Like, it's definitely, besides the secret boss fight, it is actually my favorite fight in the whole game, just because you're like,
well, favorite sequence, because that's a whole boss ladder that never ends.
It never ends. But that part specifically was great. And even how, like, Zack controls, I love how he operates.
Well, so thanks for bringing that up. Do you think that? Well, we'll talk about DLC actually later, but clearly that's what I'm assuming DLC. They already have a Zack build. They have his, like, skill set and everything already built. I feel as though they would not have constructed some sort of build like that. And though it's slightly complex, right? Like, he can charge up and, like, level up his certain abilities, whatever. I feel as though they're building that to either do DLC, which we'll talk more about later, or have him, like, be more of a playable character in Part 3.
And that's the thing. It's like, the question with Part 3 is, like, it's what are they going to do? Are they going to address everything in the compilation? If so, yeah. But with Zack is more, because he's a fully built and playable character, without, again, in part 3, because I was saying I wanted the game to end at a certain point, and I wanted it to end where Cloud gives Sephiroth the black materia, and then he loses his mind, and then he's in mid-deal with Tifa, and then in the original game, like, Sid takes over as the party leader. Instead, like, Zack will take over.
Oh, that's
because you have someone who uses a bladed sword, and Zack's in the timeline and meets up with them, and it's a complete inversion. But Zack also knows that Cloud is on the mends, and Zack's like, okay, well, Cloud needs to get better. I'll take the reins for now, while Tifa's with Cloud. But I have a whole nother thing with Tifa because of that.
The Tifa of it all.
Because that Gungaga incident where you see her get exposed to like the Mako, and she sees the white and black whispers clashing.
I remember texting you being like, what is going on here?
So the white whispers, so in the first game, the black whispers were a representation of Sephiroth trying to rewrite reality. The white ones are Aerith. I wrote this to you, but Aerith makes this comment to Red, and if you do the date sequence with Nanaki or Red in the Gold Saucer...
Which I did end up watching, by the way, so that's kind of fascinating.
So he's like, Aerith and I could see the future, now we can't. And then Aerith is like talking to him, and she's like, this used to be a white materia, now it's clear. At the end of the game, she gives Cloud like the clear materia. And so...
Oh, the end of... Yeah.
So what happens is Cloud goes to a different part in time or whatever, and
which again, like I do want to focus on that aspect of, is it a different timeline? Is it a different, technically just multiversal world type thing?
Now, like, my theory is that the Aerith from the original game, and I've not heard anyone say this one yet, and mine's crazy, but the Aerith,
this is trademarked opinions, by the way.
The Aerith from the original game, who died, who it ended up, wholly ended up working and everything. And in Advent Children, when Cloud sees her and Zack at the end in a white void, which also in Remake, remember when Cloud gets knocked out and he's in a white void for a little bit too? I think the original game's Aerith found the Promised Land. They've been pitching the Promised Land forever, and we don't know. Either we're going to see what this is, or it's the suitcase from Pulp Fiction. So my theory is that Aerith is in the Promised Land, and Sephiroth, who also has interest in the Promised Land because former Shinra, and Hojo's involved in this too because of the Vice project. But,
oh gosh, Hojo.
Sephiroth is trying to rewrite reality because Aerith is just... And this also ties into most theories, that Aerith is just too overpowered, and he's trying to essentially rewrite reality, and that was the first game with the Black Whispers. Now in this game, Aerith is trying to stop him. So much so that, like, again, you go to this different timeline reality thing, you get a white materia, you give it to Aerith in your current one, she goes behind her head, and then gives you the clear materia. And then when she dies, she drops the loaded full white materia into the water, yet Cloud still has the clear materia. So clearly it's a game of chess or Queen's Blood, where Aerith and Sephiroth are basically going at each other from different times,
worlds, timelines, everything else.
And so... And it's just basically a game, and so that's why, like, Zack enters the timeline with the white void, because Aerith is like, okay, Zack needs to be
moving the chess pieces around.
To be here, white and black with chess pieces and stuff like that.
Well, and then at the end of the game too, once you do finish most of the boss ladder and what have you, and you go back to Zack, and this is after he's already faced the whatever something Sephiroth, the upgraded Sephiroth, forget the boss's character's name is,
Sephiroth Reborn or something
like that. Yeah, you might be. I think that's actually it. Anyways, like, you have Zack there, and he's essentially like resigned to his fate. You see Meteor coming to destroy that timeline, world, whatever, and then you see that white, and then he falls into that again. So I think that's a great point, because it's almost Aerith intervening again, plucking that Zack, and then trying to put him now, to your point, which would totally make sense, is what I also assumed as well, is that at the very end of the game, Zack has now landed in our prime universe, world, whatever you want to call it.
As the ultimate play, because what we're seeing is like the remake timeline, what they're trying to do, they're still trying to preserve the integrity of the original game. They're trying to say, like, that original game is like a tablet, and like nothing will ever change. What we're seeing right now is a greatest hits, and we're seeing how these omnipresent characters, basically Sephiroth and Aerith, each achieving it their own unique ways. Sephiroth, because Cloud messed him up all those years ago and he still can't get over it. And then Aerith, because Sephiroth messes her up, but Aerith is the chosen one. She is the chosen one character. I mean, she's the last ancient Cetra. She is the chosen one character. Cloud's your pilot, but she is the chosen one.
Sure.
Now, where this ties into Tifa, and I find this very interesting, is she sees all this, she's exposed to the Mako, and she is the only other character besides Cloud to start seeing multiple dual things.
Which is also new from the original game as well, is her getting, like, having her own little live stream thing. Of course,
it's a precursor to what's going to happen in this game.
It definitely is like it's almost like the prequel to what happens later.
which is and a lot of people are thinking like they might not do the live stream sequence, but I'm like, that is the best part, the climax, the pinnacle of the original.
That's how Cloud basically becomes whole again.
It's amazing. It's like it's the top 5 favorite sequences in a game ever. It's the part that I'm just like, oh, this is really something else.
And I will say, like, I guess a lot of it we'll just talk about the ending, because so much of the story content is about the ending and the revelations, right? So one key thing I thought was really cool is we have more understanding what reunion is. Like, even the original game, you're just like, reunion, like, what the heck is that? And it's kind of like the reunion of Genova's cells and whatever. And Sephiroth is like trying to become, how do I put this? Almost like a omnipresent god, or like super OP being of some kind.
He's just like
ultimate power.
Yeah, F everything. F everything.
I'm gonna absorb the life stream and be a god. Basically, it's like the original one.
There's another little theory before you go on, and this is an interesting one, and I don't see this happening, but it's not a. There's some idea that it's more Sephiroth is trying to just get rid of Jenova entirely. Like, Sephiroth sees Jenova actually as the real problem, as an obstacle, as the problem here. And that...
Interesting.
That a lot of people are theorizing that we're going to get a Zack Cloud Sephiroth fight against Jenova, because that's fan service, because Sephiroth...
Wow, that would be something.
Because the Jenova aspect is like... is pretty much like the real catalyst for everything, for the soldier program, for absolutely everything. And so that's, I don't think that's the case though, but I'm just throwing that out there. But anyway,
no, that's fascinating. I don't know how like part 3 will go, of course, in that respect. That's really super cool. That's a really neat theory. For me, no, I was just going to mention that with Reunion, we kind of get that full understanding by the end that Sephiroth wants to like reunite all of these various branches of realities, world, whatever.
Yeah.
And he wants to now not just become like the god of your world. He wants to be the god of like all time, space, reality, whatever. And I just found that to be really interesting, that you do kind of get a clear answer about that by the end, but also the fact that they would change like so much of the story to like being like a super god now. Like I'm just absorbing all the different worlds. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and he's getting more and more powerful clearly by the end, where he's sending Zack, when you do have your Cloud and Zack fight, he's like, oh, so too do these worlds like come together, so too must they part or whatever, like you mentioned earlier. And then just slicing the ground like, oh, bye, Zack, back to your own timeline, I guess.
And that's the other thing, too, that makes you think that, like, because Sephiroth can't actually do that. Like, he can't really, like, he's not that powerful unless there is an entity of him that can do that, which makes because Aerith at the very end, she like surrounds you all in that white void too. Like she's able to do that kind of stuff, which then makes you think that there is something more out there. And I think we're dealing with those original entities of Aerith and Sephiroth from the original game, especially because Advent Children tease that.
Yeah.
Now, where I think Tifa plays into this is the fact that she saw those multiple timelines too. She is the only character at the end that doesn't say anything. Everyone else says something.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I did find that to be very interesting.
She says absolutely nothing and just looks at everyone like, what the hell is going on? Yeah, like it can be interpreted like she is really distraught that Cloud
she's in shock, maybe.
Yeah, she's in shock. She lost her like best friend, and
they really did build up the Aerith Tifa dynamic way more
way better
than any of the previous games, whatever. And they kind of did a little bit in remake, of course, too. Those were kind of the seeds that were planted, but this they really bloomed. I mean, just they're clearly they're buddy they're having side chats and whatever. And the fact it's those three doing the Junon, the parade and everything, and how your relationship changes depending on if you're able to win the actual
win the parade,
match,
and then in Gongaga, Cloud says Zack's a loser, and they both frown at him, what are you talking about?
Yo, what a loser!
What a loser! Man. They're like, come again? but the thing is every character says something, but she's the only character besides Cloud who's been exposed to stuff. And, at the end, Cloud's all ditzy, which I think I wrote to you about this, but it's very interesting that Cloud, there's this really high-pitched noise that plays when he pulls out the black materia.
It's just the static effect again,
Yeah, it's just it's a cool little thing. It's just this really high-pitched thing that's playing the whole time.
Yeah.
Even when Aerith's around and whatever you want to call that. But, they show this thing where, Cloud clearly sees Aerith, but no other characters do. And I'm wondering, though, if Tifa sees it too or not. Because, again, she saw the multiple timeline split. She's the only character. When you see that weird... Because they don't, show... Which I'm there's your teen rating. You don't see Sephiroth actually impale Aerith in this game.
So I do have... I wonder if part of my also feelings about Rebirth is also how they handled one of the biggest moments in all of gaming history, really, is the Aerith... it's hard to say death, because, I think she's...
Because he blocks he blocks the shot, and you're like, oh, so that's what they're doing. But then you see the bloody sword, and you're like,
well, so here, and I felt like it was almost, and I kept on telling you because things kept on coming up where I couldn't breeze through to the end, but I just kept on assuming oh, Aerith's gonna die. I'm not mentally and emotionally ready to handle this because now it's in really pretty graphics. Now I'm really gonna be sad.
Which. Real quick, Temple of the Ancients, talk about a 180 from the original. That was a very fun final dungeon. Very fun.
I will say that it was really cool being able to change the ground or gravity, to different areas was really cool. The fact that Aerith had to absorb different aspects of the life stream
and
to basically
repair things. But then things. You would meet up with each other. They'd rewind time. Well, how did they get here? Kind of thing. And you're like, oh, that was really cool.
I thought that was kind of fun and different.
It was really cool. Really cool.
But so the Temple of Agents, yes, that's a really good point. It was really cool. But I just felt like they kind of, I don't want to say fumbled the whole Aerith death, but because they're trying to be vague and they clearly have in mind what they want Aerith to be in the next game, and I get trying to be mysterious, but because of that moment is so iconic, to have it be this weird, she's stabbed, oh, she's not, she's bleeding, no, she's not, no, she's alive, but maybe in Cloud's mind, but maybe not, and then even Sephiroth is oh, you will never be able to see in such clouded eyes or something, he says at one point, where I'm sitting there going well, his name is Cloud too, well, that's kind of cheesy, but it did frustrate me, because look, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Either she's dead and she's a spirit, that's fine, Or he did, which I was half hoping would be the real reality of he actually saved her, and maybe it's now Tifa that somehow is the one who gets killed, like, because he changed fate.
Yeah,
and because the changing fate of Aerith, someone technically has to die and be like a woman in Cloud's life or something, whatever, right? Maybe it's Tifa then that died. Not that I want Tifa to die, but
I don't think they would. I don't think they do, just because she's so
like, so pivotal to the rest of the story.
To Cloud's identity. Like, she's the only one that could do that.
To me, it just felt like, not a disservice, but a frustration of mine to be like, okay, make a clear decision. And so, not only that, to then have this giant boss ladder, whatever thing, and yeah, it's cool, you are teaming up with Zack, and then you have, like, different pieces where different parts of the party, and it's like frenetic and cool and stuff because they're all fighting, whatever, and then you get to the very end, and then suddenly Aerith's back again, coming up from the wood. You're like, so she is alive? Oh no, she's dead, because everyone's really sad about it.
Everyone's really
it's like, okay, so she's dead, but Cloud can see her, she's an illusion or something, but maybe not, because the timelines, and maybe also he fractured the realities there again, and now there's two timelines, so she's alive in one. I mean, get the whole point of creating conversation and creating, like, that questioning and being vague and whatnot, but I just think because of how pivotal that moment of all of gaming, really, humbly speaking, and specifically to Final Fantasy VII, that's such an important thing to have happen. And you brought this up too, which is so big. They just completely gloss over him, like from the original, lowering her into the water, the weirdly 2 foot of water that's also 100 foot of water.
None of that.
Like, that's not there, which is confounding to me too. Maybe in part 3 they're gonna show a flashback where he did do that or something,
or go snowboarding,
or
whatever.
Well, I wanted to go snowboarding after that, which was so weird in the original, to go from such a major event like that to now you're snowboarding down
Icicle in,
which I did not get sad about that not being part of the ending, but
or Bone Village,
which is whatever,
useless.
But it just to me, not to ramble on here, but it just was so confounding to not have a clear answer, but sort of have an answer, but also not. It's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, where they don't feel like answering it until part 3.
And so the developers, writers, Nojima, the writer, and Nomura, and the director, they all said, they were like, it's a trilogy. And so they said that one of their big influences was Star Wars. And they said, this game,
hopefully the original trilogy.
Yeah. They said this game by the end will feel like The Empire Strikes Back. They've said that in interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And
it does, actually.
It does, because it's just like A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie. The first game, when it ends, while leaving a lot of questions, very exciting.
Yeah.
The second game leaves a lot of questions, and you're like, that's it? Like Empire Strikes Back. Like Empire Strikes Back.
And you have a major, essentially almost character death, because at the time, you know, when
Han Solo.
Yes, with Han Solo, you're like, oh, like he's dead, or he's dead, gone, or something, whatever.
So what's going on? But he's not. And so there's a lot of narrative parallels that I'm seeing, and
that's a good point.
The only thing that's different this time, which we can start moving into our predictions for what's to come next.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Is the next game, is what are they going to do? Because now, this next game, and if you have any other things in your points, please bring them up. We can still, because like
I feel like there might be a whole second part to this, but I'll just leave it with no one cares, Glenn. No.
Yeah. Well, see, that was interesting too, because we didn't even talk about Roche, because Roche and Glenn were basically just like red herrings or whatever. Like Roche, which sucks, because I liked Roche's character. I thought it was like a really.
You mean Rufus?
Roche.
Oh, sorry.
Because he was very much like Glenn, where like Roche, you think he's going to be like a big player, especially with that scene where he's getting like the injection thing or whatever, but then he's just an example of a black robe thing. And then Glenn, the whole time, you're like, what's going on? And then you're just like, oh, it's...
To both of them, I guess, really.
Glenn is just a Sephiroth mouthpiece, so...
a more sophisticated... That was one thing where it didn't quite... Not to obsess about that, but it didn't make sense to me, is you have all the black robe guys, right? And then they can like morph into essentially Sephiroth. To have this black robe morph into a character of technically like Rufus's past, it just seemed kind of weird, and then also just more intelligible compared to the other black robes. Like, well, wait, now is this a new power that you just only wanted for this one made up Glenn person and no other black robe? What?
And maybe they'll address that going forward. But yeah, no, that was peculiar, and it's like, is that the case? Because like, there's questions too about Rufus, because I didn't know this, but Rufus created Shinra. I mean, Rufus created Avalanche.
Oh, I don't think
Rufus created Avalanche because he ultimately wanted his dad's position, because he has bigger ambitions, bigger plans for what Shinra.
Yeah, he definitely has daddy issues.
So we also see like in Advent Children that Rufus sees stuff. So it could. I'm curious to see what they do with that angle with him and Hojo.
They are making him way more. And you know what's interesting? Rufus, they keep on trying to build him up as a more important character.
Yeah.
Compared to the original game. And then on the flip side...
Him and the Turks.
And the Turks, yeah. And then for Hojo, I keep on just forgetting. But every time I see him on the screen, I'm like, I hate this guy.
I want to peel the flesh from them. That weird scene he's talking about.
Also, by the way, I'm sorry. I understand, like, it's a Final Fantasy game. But, like, they also base... Final Fantasy VII specifically does seem to base itself more in reality and more logical things than other Final Fantasy games.
It does,
right?
and that's the draw.
And so for Hojo, though, to spout off these wild things, and then everyone in the boardroom's just like, okay, that's just Hojo. Yeah. Sure, this is fine.
He's just being crazy.
No! What? You guys might be all bad, but that makes no sense.
So, like, and that's the thing, too, is, and this goes into, again...
we can move on to predictions. There's so many points to cover.
We've been in that, but, like... because this also technically has to include the compilation, how will they wrap it all up? Because Hojo...
I don't know if they have to, but I do think they don't have to laid a lot of different seeds that I would be surprised if it didn't pay off. I mean, one of the biggest one, if you did play Intermission, of course, is the Underground,
Nero and Vice and everything. Vice is Hojo. It's a backup of Hojo's memory, which you see. And did you get to that in the original game?
Which?
Well, in Rebirth, where you go back to the Shinra mansion and you see like an AI of Hojo that he stored his memory in the mansion.
Oh yeah,
you saw that. If anything, that's a precursor to the Vice stuff, because that's what Vice ultimately is.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least I would say almost has to be Nero coming back, because it just would make. I don't want to say like it wouldn't make any sense, but I would just be pretty surprised if
he's part of the story now. I mean,
he's part of the story, and they may ensure that he's part of the story at the end of
Intermission.
Close to end of Rebirth. Actually, remember when all of the characters go on their trial,
and then
Yuffie's has, I forget if Nero like the fake physical form comes, but I know like his dark tentacle type stuff was there. I think actually Nero is in there very, very briefly in her little trial, if you will. But it would just be so weird between Intermission and Rebirth to keep having kind of there, and then just in Part 3 just never address it. I would just be so surprised. So to your point about compilation, the Dirge part of it, at least, I think is definitely going to be addressed in Part 3 for sure.
No, they have to address that. They have to address Advent Children. My insane theory for what 3 is as of now. I think first off, they're saying like we're not doing DLC for Rebirth. Like what you got is it. And it's fair, it's a lot. But I'm like, they gave us Sid and Vincent without gameplay, and if there's a good time to do a DLC to have those characters playable, the smart move here is you get you have a DLC that delves more into deep ground stuff, and Vincent and Sid are playable characters, and we'll get to see how Vincent actually plays. And then on top of that, you can use this time to flesh out Sid's backstory, because they skipped all of like Rocket Town and everything with Sid. And now I don't know if they'll necessarily do that, but that would be the best play here. Use the DLC to continue that deep ground storyline, and then honestly,
deep ground, that's what it is.
Yeah, and then honestly, maybe even for part 3, do a DLC where it concludes that storyline or something. I don't know, but like maybe they're saving the DLC mostly focusing on that. So use this DLC potentially for Rebirth as a way to get you acquainted with how those characters will operate. Maybe introduce some new mechanics, because they had like the synergy moves in the intermission DLC, which then...
Oh, I love the synergy moves and stuff. That was definitely
so
a
cool.
huge thing, and I'm so glad we got to have that type of experience with the gameplay. But anyway,
so good. So my ultimate theory of, besides that DLC, first off, I think that the third game with the titles, Remake, Rebirth, it's either going to be, my initial take, Reclaim, as in like reclaiming the planet, or Return.
Oh, see, I feel mine is the more obvious one, Reunion.
But they did Crisis Core, which then also they did Crisis Core Reunion.
Oh, that's true. And then, yeah.
And they're probably going to do Dirge of Cerberus. They're going to have to remaster that one. But like that seems like the next logical step, right? And so they would give it a retitle too, and I'm not sure what they would call that.
Return actually could be kind of interesting.
Return would work just because of the timelines returning or something, converging. I ultimately think that, especially because I sent you that picture, but the split in the sky is
that only Cloud can see. Maybe Tifa, maybe not.
Maybe Tifa is the same split that's in the live stream sequence. That Tifa's been exposed to the live stream, so she knows what's going on. She's the only other character besides Cloud at this point, because Aerith's gone, that could even be connected to this.
Yeah.
So
and that's like Zack being in the church. They specifically did that, so you don't know if Zack is technically in the prime timeline or not.
So we're going to get that live stream sequence, but I think they're going to take it a little further. I think we're going to get the live stream with Cloud's identity, and then the compilation as a whole. I think we're going to see Advent Children stuff, Dirge stuff, like stuff where the characters realize that that this is kind of already happened, and also like equaling to those other timelines, realities where Dirge of Cerberus already happened, Advent Children already happened, the original game already happened. Like these are part of those realities where we're gonna see that, because they need to make this series, which they've done a pretty good job at, making it accessible to anyone. Where like if you never played the original game or any of that, you can jump into Remake and enjoy it. They've gone in interviews about that, so
it would make sense.
It would make sense that they would try and at least introduce that. Where you're doing the live stream sequence, but you're also getting a huge exposure of, and they don't have to overdo it, but like just like a huge exposure of the whole compilation, so they can properly wrap up their entire story. And then, especially because that last third of the game in theory is it's the Medial stuff with the live stream sequence, and then they're going back into Midgar for a little bit, but then it's a lot of boss fights. It's a lot of like fighting the weapons and stuff like that.
I think actually gets a good point to bring up the going back to Midgar. You think that's when they meet up with Zack finally? I mean, if Zack is
that's not bad.
I mean, if Zack's already there,
that's not bad. I mean, what if he's like looking around and that's when they parachute down or something?
Yeah, it could be something like that.
That's not bad. That's not bad. I kind of like it.
And I also think that the Rufus of it all, they've built up his character between Remake and Rebirth. That I don't think that, because in the original game, you know, like he shoots the cannon, it opens up the northern crater. Yeah. But then he gets killed by, was it one of the weapons, right?
Yeah.
If I remember right?
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say killed.
Because he's an Advent
you
children.
assume he's dead until Advent Children came
where
out
he has
and
geostigma.
proven otherwise, right?
He has
geostigma.
Yeah.
Which that's a whole thing to unpack. But
that's a whole thing to unpack.
I don't think they're going to have geostigma in this. I would...
No, because geostigma feels like, because of what that feels like the aftermath of the original game. Because the original game's ending wasn't a perfect...
Reverberations or something.
Yeah.
There you go. There's another R word. Maybe it's Final Fantasy VII Reverberations.
But the thing is like, yeah, the geostigma was an aftermath of like ultimately was an aftermath of the meteor and holy thing, and that's kind of what stemmed geostigma.
Return.
So cutting that out would make sense if they're trying to make like a definitive ending where you would be like, okay, well then part 3 after that we're just gonna walk into Advent Children, where I don't think this time. I think this time we're just, there's no other, like, that's it. And so they're going to the promised land, whatever that ends up being.
Yeah.
And maybe they take like the right people with them, and then Hojo and everyone are left on Gaia as it withers away or something. But then it also doesn't make sense because like,
well, that sounds like the Rapture.
yeah, because again,
I don't know.
Again, I'm talking out loud because like the original game does talk about environmentalism and how like how the planet still prevails in the end when you see Red, Nanaki, and everyone at the very end and stuff like that, and you're like, well, that's really cool. So they got to find some way to do the Promised Land, but also tying that environmentalism thing, because that is a huge, to me, Final Fantasy VII was about environmentalism, and then basically just like confidence in yourself and like realization of yourself and trusting one another kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think the environmentalism thing is like, yeah, I think that's very much hammered home for sure. I'm trying to think of everything else. So I think that Rufus will, I could see him perishing, but I don't think it's going to be in the original game's method. I think that he actually gets killed by Sephiroth. I'm going to make that bold prediction now, that somehow I'm going to say that somehow, some way, I don't know how, like, narratively speaking it happens, he figures something out and he goes to maybe the Northern Crater and encounters Sephiroth, and he gets killed, and maybe some of the Turks escape, but he doesn't, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing spaghetti on a wall, right? That's what bold predictions are for.
And again, like, we can, if we can always like do another one where we have like more predictions as more information.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of like beats we didn't even really talk about too much that we'll
like the gold saucer stuff, like
the whole gold saucer sequences. And then what am I going to say? What do you think? Is Aerith dead?
No, again, as I said, Aerith.
Well, actually, let me rephrase. Do you think they're going to ever truly address yes dead, yes alive?
Aerith Doctor Stranged herself in this game, basically. In Infinity War. Aerith knew she had to die for the bigger purpose kind of thing, because she's been in contact with her future self.
It was the only way.
It was the only way. And so, no, because again, they've been teasing this forever about the Promised Land, and no one really talks about this. And again, maybe the Promised Land is just a MacGuffin, but just like the reaching for, like, always something to be reaching for kind of thing.
I think there's always something you're reaching for, and then, like, I know it's a lot of people, like, Promised Land's really just the life stream, being one with the life stream, and it's like, is Promised Land just another way of saying, like, heaven for those who are really religious?
It could very well be that, but either it's a completely unanswered question, or for me, as of now, I'm believing that eventually they will all, the right characters will all go to the Promised Land, and that's like the end, and you get like the Return of the Jedi shot of them all partying or something. I don't know. And the Promised Land, like, they just basically, the Promised Land just looks like Gaia again, except it's not mined with Mako, and it looks like really lush, and like basically how
the original ending, we have Nanaki and like their cub, I guess, or friend or something, whatever, and you see how like the greenery has overtaken.
I'm thinking too Midgard. More like that really sad scene with Aerith and her mom in Rebirth, where like they're in the train car and she paints like this like really amazing landscape.
Oh my gosh,
and,
yes, that's
that
what brutal.
Because her mom did that. I'm thinking that's what the Promised Land looks like.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, just a lot of greenery and it's like peaceful and whatnot.
Lush.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks that it's going to be almost similar to like an Advent Children close to end type of deal, where maybe again it's just Cloud, or maybe it's Cloud and the party, and they get to meet up with Aerith again. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's not your time, and then kind of forces them back to the present or to our world, whatever you want to call it. But I also, a bold prediction, I think someone else in the party dies. And I don't count like Kate Sith or however you pronounce his name. I don't.
Reeve.
Whatever. Reeve is just an easier way of saying like Reeve. His death, like, they don't count. As he said, even at the end of Rebirth, almost, where it's like, oh, there's just another one of me.
There's just another one, yeah.
I feel like, and it's gonna be a character you don't expect, and I don't know if it's a Barrett. It's not gonna be Tifa.
It's not gonna be.
I could see it being like Vincent, for instance, maybe. You know, like I could see him perishing. Like he comes to peace to like his past with Sephiroth, and well, we won't get into the whole compilation backstory for Vincent, but I just think that he comes to terms of peace and he goes to like make a sacrifice, giving Cloud or someone the opportunity to get the killing blow in. I don't know. I just have a feeling.
I think if they're gonna do that, it's gonna be Sid.
You think it'd be Sid?
Because in all of the other Final Fantasy games, there are Sids.
And don't they usually die?
And they die.
You know what? That's fair. I mean, if they want to keep it more traditional with...
They would be traditional. I mean, like, I guess, like, 7 is different because he doesn't die, but, like...
What if he, like, there's a moment in the game where Sid is, like, piloting the High Wind, and he pilots it into, like, Sephiroth or something as, like a you know, suicide bomber, for lack of better terms, type of deal. Whether it's, like, let the party escape or something, or to... I don't know. He gets emotional and it's like, screw you, Sephiroth. I'm going to do whatever the case may be. That's a good point. I mean, it could be said. I just feel like there's going to be some sort of carnage that's more than the original game, because I just don't believe that everyone is hunky-dory and everyone's happy the end. I also don't think, with the amount of effort that they've done for Zack, that they would have him die in part 3. I just think that'd be so ridiculous of, oh, he's alive, and the second part of like, oh, all this cool stuff, and he's still technically alive, and the third one would be like, no, he dies. I just feel like that would be the fans would go rabid, in my opinion, to kill him off.
Especially because they're making all of this effort to bring him back into the fold. And also too, I know Aerith's death it's important, but again, I think in the end, because her original self is in play, manipulating all of this, her like omnipresence, again, I think they're gonna officially like get her back as well. One of my ideas is that one of the final battles in the game are Cloud, Tifa, Zack, Aerith against Sephiroth, where they will give you, because you can control 3 characters, they will give you a 4th option where you can shuffle between 4. It's not very hard to do, or they very much do it like the intermission thing, where like Cloud and Zack are the main characters, and then Tifa and Aerith are like sewn on, basically.
No, I agree with that. My initial prediction was you had Cloud, Zack, and Aerith all fighting Sephiroth at the very end, because you had like a build upon like some of the battles that have already occurred.
And I only roped Tifa in there because of her importance to Cloud's identity, and then because of her that Mako exposure in Gungaga.
No, they're definitely making Tifa even. I mean, Tifa's an important character, but I think they're building her up to be even more important.
Yeah,
so I could definitely see that happen.
Because Barrett's story even in this game, Barrett's story is with Dyne, and that's his character arc is pretty much wrapped. He's just along for the ride.
Yeah.
And Yuffie's, which part 3 as well, we got to adjust the Wutai stuff. Like Yuffie's.
Well, I assume like part 3 is going to be, and this is more of an obvious prediction, that Wutai's going to be very
100%.
heavily involved.
100%.
I mean, when you go through the original game, at this point, if you're comparing like story structures, you've already been to Wutai most likely in the original game.
Oh yeah, I was.
Before Aerith dies in the original game versus now. Yeah. Which, I mean, that makes sense though. Like, you want to focus more on like the Aerith of it all at the very end versus incorporating what they're clearly doing is having some sort of like war between Shinra and Wutai, and they're saving that for part 3. And I'm also curious now, because Rufus has that revelation that's been Sephiroth being the puppet master to this conflict. I wonder if Rufus tries to somehow dial back that whole war, but Wutai is just so pissed that there is a war.
Yeah.
Which would be understandable on their end. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting story beats there. But yeah, like I said, bold prediction. I think someone in the party doesn't make it, and Sid, that's a good call out. Sid or Vincent. I don't know. For some reason, like, I don't know why Barrett came to mind, but I could just see, like, Tifa taking over as caregiver for Marlene because they were close.
Yeah, that's true. And, like, the only thing with Barrett why I don't think it's him is because they teased his death in Remake, remember? Where Sephiroth...
Oh, yeah, and then one of the Whispers brought him back to life.
So I'm just like, would they do that again? I'm like, that's why I don't think
that's so. That's a good point. Yeah, it's like, crying wolf, you can't do it more than once. But yeah, I'm just almost convinced that there will be a major character death, because I think all of the huge revelations, the huge swings, the huge changes are clearly happening in part 3. Now, hopefully I'm not putting on a pedestal that I kind of had from Remake into Rebirth, where, they can change their fate. There's going to be all these changes, and there really wasn't until the last couple hours of Rebirth. So hopefully I'm not setting myself up for that. But we'll see, obviously.
I want them to answer. They don't have to answer everything. They don't have to explain everything. But as long as they get like 80% of it, that's fine. So as long as they cover 80% of most of the stuff and end it in a decent enough way where it feels final, that's good enough for me. And also, little bit of a hot take. I don't think it should be as long as Rebirth. I
hope not.
Longer. Remake's like 40 hours, roughly 40 hours, and then Rebirth is Rebirth. Call it roughly 100 hours. For me, it was 120, but
I would say a crisp at least 80. If you're like not doing everything, like I didn't do everything, and I think I'm at 82, 84. Granted, the only thing I haven't really done is the Gold Saucer mini game stuff.
Those take some time.
Which takes time. And then the final proto relic mission thing, whatever you want to call it.
That takes time.
Which right, and at that point, I got to the point where honestly, I was like, I'm tired of doing all this side content. Not to diminish the value of that. I'm sure it's all great stuff, but at that point I just really wanted to know what in the world happens after already sinking 80 hours into the game. It's like, all right, give me that ending now. I need to know.
And you can go back and you can do it, get everything else before you try hard.
And that's what I intend on doing. For sure.
Yeah. And so maybe what we do is after you possibly get done that all, maybe we loop back around and go again, so you can maybe talk about some of the other stuff, because there's like other things like my favorite moment from the game was the whole Gold Saucer sequence with the no promises to keep thing. That whole experience was like,
that was brutal for my emotions.
It was brutal for your emotions. like I've never, besides like a Sonic the Hedgehog game, like no game has affected me like that much emotionally. Maybe the original game during like the live stream sequence and such, and
the original game definitely spoke to me a little bit.
And the aftermath when Cloud is like talking to everyone and he's like, I wasn't who I said I was a fraud and blah blah blah. But then like when they're all
picking him up, basically,
and they forgive him, and then he does like that sigh thing. It's like it's such a great moment, because then he finally becomes like full circle moment, and he's just becomes this amazing character at that point.
I will say that the only other game, not to focus on other games, is The Last of Us Part 2 hashtag spoilers for Last of Us Part 2. I won't say there's a big moment relatively in the first half of it that definitely me emotionally wise.
Oh yeah, you were writing to me about that.
Just completely wrecked me, and I like had to put the game down for a couple days. But yeah, other than that, not many other games have kind of spoken to me on that emotional level. But it's a service to them, like how they've expanded the characters and how you got attached to like some of the more minor characters, like making Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse all like valuable interesting characters. It's crazy.
They had Corneo's bodyguard returned in this game.
Oh yeah.
Did you? I'm like, what? And did you complete that side quest with him? Mm-hmm. You know, like he's looking for that girl still, and then like.
You're wondering, like,
it's still unanswered, so they're gonna probably answer it in the
probably
third
gonna be a part 3. Yeah, there is dangling stuff like that. I will say that before wrapping up is one thing that was kind of laughable, honestly, to me, and one thing that I was not a huge fan of was the branching, timelines. Whatever. Zack goes to save Biggs, and then Biggs is like musing how basically he's an NPC, and then instant death, gets shot, and you're like,
oh god.
Such build up that he's alive for this whole game, and then 2 seconds dead. And you're like, well, what? So I really hope that was just more of a shock value. No worries, part 3, we're gonna he'll actually be more relevant or something. I don't know, but I just think that'd be so much of a disservice to have this build up that, oh, there's changes. Oh, Biggs lived. Oh, no, he did.
No. Yeah, and I wonder what they're going to do with all of them. I'm not sure. Another thing I wanted to say, though, because that's on my top of my head, I kind of want Cloud, because I want Cloud to get the fusion sword, the Advent Children sword.
Yes, that would be pretty awesome.
Screw the ultimate weapon that you get in the original game.
Yeah, no one cares about that. Let's get that fusion sword.
The fusion sword, but they could use it to make his gameplay different because because Zack's gonna rock the Buster Sword. He has to. So if you give Cloud the fusion sword, you can change his gameplay up a little bit, where he and Zack feel a little bit different to each other. Where you can do really fancy stuff with the fusion sword. That would be so sick.
Yeah. No, I agree. That would be really cool. Really, just any elements. From Advent Children, I think would be kind of cool to have sprinkled in. I mean, we'll obviously see, of course, but I'm really stoked for part 3.
And we're both under agreement that part 3 will be in 2027. I mean, it has to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've read like some interviews where they've alluded that they've done a lot of the pre-work, and they don't want a huge time gap like it was between Remake and Rebirth, but they did credit that to 1 year specifically being dedicated to intermission development. So I think that it's going to be 3 years. Even like the creators have said how, it's going to be a similar timeline to Remake to Rebirth, but like probably a year less because of the whole DLC.
And they built the world. They just need I think they just need to figure out how the High Wind works in this. Like how flying the concept of flying it over all those worlds is insane. My hunch is like,
I don't know if that will happen.
The High Wind piloting will be its own separate engine, if you will, and then like when you you'll be able to fly in the air, and then like it'll give you an indication on the top of the screen, okay, you're on Gold Saucer, and then like you press A to land, and then there's a cutscene of the thing landing, and then you're automatically there.
I almost think they're going to, like, because of the world they built and stuff, I almost think it's going to be a cop-out where it's kind of like a fast travel thing mostly.
Oh yeah.
And really, like, you'll still have like cutscenes of them landing or taking off, whatever, just to have a little fun thing to it. But I don't even know if it's quite accomplishable.
Especially because like you already have the fast travel at the end of this game, and like that's way
and that's already pre-built. I feel like they're just going to maybe do, I don't say cop out, maybe that's not fair to say, but
or just like the High Wind serves as your HQ, like for
you can walk around like and do stuff.
Like in Rebirth, my HQ was Costa del Sol. Like whenever I wanted to like go and get items or do stuff, I'd just jump there because Coral has all the different stuff to do. So I would always just jump there. It's the start of chapter 12. So that's like the last chapter before it's the end of the game thing. So I always just jump there, go to Costa del Sol, get whatever I need to get. Johnny's Inn is there, so
I haven't gotten all the like trophy things to open up his chest yet, but that's like...
The reward, it's cool, but it's pointless. It's cool.
Yeah, I haven't even Googled what it is yet.
Do you want to know?
I kind of do.
It's Sephiroth's theme on the piano.
Oh. Well, that's very, very anticlimactic.
It's very hard, obviously. It's the hardest one to do.
Well, not only is it hard in the piano, but, like, that's a lot of effort just to get a piano. Like, you would think it would have been,
You get the trophy, but then that's the little icing on the cake. It's, like, the hardest piano challenge. Yeah, I know. It's
fine.
It's better than nothing, I guess. But,
I mean, the piano stuff was kind of... I mean, having played piano myself for, like, 15 years, like, I really appreciated
it was
the authenticity of a lot of, like, the, like, sounds and whatever. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. The mechanics of it a little bit are kind of wonky just with being directional on like, the pads and stuff.
It was one of the better mini games, but it still had...
It has some clunkiness. Yeah. I knew what they were going for, and I really appreciate what they were going for.
Same, yeah.
But, you know, I won't OCD about that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think 2027, 30th anniversary of the game, I think it just makes logical sense in the world.
They're already, I think I sent you a picture, they're already mocapping the game.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to, the script's written, and so they're probably going to start voice recording, like, later this year.
Yeah. I mean, I would personally love for them not to linchpin themselves to the 30th anniversary and get here sooner. I just don't foresee a world how you release another major AAA game in 2 years unless they were like literally working on both in tandem, almost like when you shoot movies back to back and they're within a year of each other because you've shot everything.
Again, it's because they have that world built out. Like, the only thing they need to add is the icicle area, which you see on the world map, you just can't go to. So, like, that's really it.
There's also not that much left to travel to.
No, there's not. And that's the thing. I think there's going to be a lot of boss fights. You got to do the weapons.
It's going to be such a boss-heavy
part 3, but then also lore-heavy, which is what I think we all want, which is why also...
The cutscenes are twice as long now.
But I also believe, again, it should not be over 100 hours. It should not be 40. 80, I think it's a fair number, like for everything in Part 3.
That 80. Is one thing, not to be too critical. They definitely can tone down the amount of side stuff you can do.
I don't think they'll... but I think, like... If they have one side thing, it's the Wu-Tai thing, but I don't even think that's going to be a side thing.
Yeah, I mean, they'll definitely have some side stuff, obviously, but I just... if they have world intel, then it's all like that again. Because that's one thing when I replay it, I will not be sad about. Is like, oh, where's this tower? Gotta go find it. Where's this other tower?
And what if those towers are beneficial to 3, and they're like, because you have the towers, you're good. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm excited for Part 3, and now I'm just. The wait is like it killed me between Remake and Rebirth, but now because there's just even more lore and even more stuff I'm waiting for, it's gonna be super hard to wait till potentially 2027 if we're right.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, so I think that's it. We've been doing this for like an hour and a half at this point, longer than an hour, but that's pretty good. Did you want to address anything else before we wrap up?
No, I feel like I have a strong inkling we'll definitely do a second part, and there'll be things I want
to
address for sure.
Because like we can go into
for hours talking about.
Yeah, we can go into spoilers about like all the chapters and stuff, and I kind of want to play the game through again in hard mode, and then kind of start like you were saying, just doing strictly story only on hard mode, but then in that way, kind of getting another opinion and paying attention to certain things. So maybe we do another one after like that, and like when we refresh ourselves with
I plan on replaying again, whether it's on hard mode or not, I don't know, but I'm going to focus specifically on story stuff with like wrapping up any side content I didn't already accomplish.
I'm going through the original game again. I already can tell you that too.
Well, I plan on doing that as well. So it might be good to like play those games and be refreshed, and then be able to head straight forward. Into another discussion. But yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I guess we can wrap this up for today. So, to our future selves, if you're listening, good job. If this is online and you're listening and you liked it, thanks for listening all this way. But yeah, that was the initial Final Fantasy VII Rebirth discussion, and
definitely more to come. I feel
definitely more
pretty
to come.
Confident.
And thanks a bunch, and have a good rest of your night, and see you later.
See ya.